Section 15 of A Popular History of France, Volume 5. A Popular History of France from the Earliest Times, Volume 5, by Francois Guizot, translated by Robert Black. Chapter 36. Henry IV, Catholic King, 1593 to 1610, Part 10. Henry IV was 56. He had been given to gallantry all his life, and he had never been faithful or exacting in his attachments. He was not one of those on whom ridicule fastens as fair prey; but he was so under the dominion of his new passion that the young Princess of Conde, who had at first exclaimed, "Jesus, my God, he is mad!" began to fancy to herself that she would be queen before long. Mary de' Medici became jealous and uneasy. She determined to take her precautions, and demanded to be crowned before the king set out on the campaign which, it was said, he was about to commence against Austria in accordance with his grand design and in concert with the Protestant princes of Germany, his allies. The Prince of Conde had a fit of jealousy; he carried off his wife first into Picardy, and then to Brussels, where he left her. Henry IV, in respect, first of going to see her, then of getting her to come back, then of threatening to go after her out of France, took some wild and puerile steps, which, being coincident with his warlike announcements and preparations, caused some strange language to be used, and were injurious to his personal weight as well as to his government's character for steadiness. Sully grew impatient and uneasy. Mary de' Medici was insisting strongly upon being crowned. The prospect of this coronation was displeasing to Henry IV, and he did not conceal it. "Hey, my friend," he said to Sully, "I know not what is the meaning of it, but my heart tells me that some misfortune will happen to me." He was sitting on a low chair which had been made for him by Sully's orders at the Arsenal, thinking and beating his fingers on his spectacle case. Then all of a sudden he jumped up, and, slapping his hands upon his thighs, "By God," he said, "I shall die in this city, and shall never go out of it. They will kill me; I see quite well that they have no other remedy in their dangers but my death. Ah! accursed coronation, thou wilt be the cause of my death." "Jesus! Sir," cried Sully, "what fancy of yours is this? If it continue, I am of opinion that you should break off this anointment and coronation, and expedition and war. If you please to give me orders, it shall soon be done." "Yes, break off the coronation," said the king; "let me hear no more about it. I shall have my mind at rest from diverse fancies which certain warnings have put into it. To bide nothing from you, I have been told that I was to be killed at the first grand ceremony I should undertake, and that I should die in a carriage." "You never told me that, sir; and so have I often been astounded to see you cry out when in a carriage, as if you had dreaded this petty peril, after having so many times seen you amidst cannon balls, musketry, lance thrusts, pike thrusts, and sword thrusts, without being a bit afraid. Since your mind is so exercised thereby, if I were you I would go away to morrow, let the coronation take place without you, or put it off to another time, and not enter Paris for a long while, or in a carriage. If you please, I will send word to Notre Dame and St. Denis to stop everything and to withdraw the workmen." "I am very much inclined," said the king, "but what will my wife say? For she hath gotten this coronation marvellously into her head." "She may say what she likes, but I cannot think that, when she knows your opinion about it, she will persist any longer." Whatever Sully might say, Mary de' Medici "took infinite offence at the king for his alarms; the matter was disputed for 3 days, with high words on all sides, and at last the laborers were sent back to work again." Henry, in spite of his presentiments, made no change in his plans; he did not go away, he did not defer the queen's coronation; on the contrary, he had it proclaimed on the 12th of May, 1610, that she would be crowned next day, the 13th, at St. Denis, and that on Sunday, the 16th, she would make her entry into Paris. On Friday, the 14th, he had an idea of going to the Arsenal to see Sully, who was ill. We have the account of this visit and of the king's assassination given by Malherbe, at that time attached to the service of Henry IV, in a letter written on the 19th of May, from the reports of eye witnesses, and it is here reproduced word for word. "The king set out soon after dinner to go to the Arsenal. He deliberated a long while whether he should go out, and several times said to the queen, 'My dear, shall I go or not?' He even went out 2 or 3 times, and then all on a sudden returned and said to the queen, 'My dear, shall I really go?' and again he had doubts about going or remaining. At last he made up his mind to go, and having kissed the queen several times, bade her adieu. Amongst other things that were remarked, he said to her, "I shall only go there and back; I shall be here again almost directly." When he got to the bottom of the steps, where his carriage was waiting for him, M. de Praslin, his captain of the guard, would have attended him, but said to him, "Get you gone; I want nobody; go about your business." Thus, having about him only a few gentlemen and some footmen, he got into his carriage, took his place on the back seat at the left hand side, and made M. d'Epernon sit at the right. Next to him, by the door, were M. de Montbazon and M. de la Force, and by the door on M. d'Epernon's side were Marshal de Lavardin and M. de Cresqui, on the front seat the Marquis of Mirabeau and his first equerry. When he came to the Croix du Tiroir, he was asked whither it was his pleasure to go. He gave orders to go towards Saint Innocent. On arriving at Rue de la Ferronnerie, which is at the end of that of Saint Honore on the way to that of Saint Denis, opposite the Salamandre he met a cart, which obliged the king's carriage to go nearer to the ironmongers' shops which are on the Saint Innocent side, and even to proceed somewhat more slowly, without stopping, however, though somebody, who was in a hurry to get the gossip printed, has written to that effect. Here it was that an abominable assassin, who had posted himself against the nearest shop, which is that with the coeur couronne percé d'une flèche, darted upon the king, and dealt him, one after the other, 2 blows with a knife in the left side; one, catching him between the armpit and the nipple, went upwards without doing more than graze; the other catches him between the 5th and 6th ribs, and, taking a downward direction, cuts a large artery of those called venous. The king, by mishap, and as if to further tempt this monster, had his left hand on the shoulder of M. de Montbazon, and with the other was leaning on M. d'Epernon, to whom he was speaking. He uttered a low cry and made a few movements. M. de Montbazon having asked, "What is the matter, sir?" he answered, "It is nothing," twice; but the second time so low that there was no making sure. These are the only words he spoke after he was wounded. In a moment the carriage turned towards the Louvre. When he was at the steps where he had got into the carriage, which are those of the queen's room, some wine was given him. Of course some one had already run forward to bear the news. Sieur de Serizy, lieutenant of M. de Praslin's company, having raised his head, he made a few movements with his eyes, then closed them immediately, without opening them again any more. He was carried upstairs by M. de Montbazon and Count de Curzon en Quercy, and laid on the bed in his closet, and at 2 o'clock carried to the bed in his chamber, where he was all the next day and Sunday. Somebody went and gave him holy water. I tell you nothing about the queen's tears; all that must be imagined. As for the people of Paris, I think they never wept so much as on this occasion." The grief was deep and general, at the court as well as amongst the people, in the provinces as well as at Paris; and with the grief were mingled surprise and alarm, and an idea also that the king had died unhappy and uneasy. On the 14th of May, in the morning, before starting upon his visit to the Arsenal, he had gone to hear mass at the Feuillants (Order of St. Bernard), and on his return he said to the Duke of Guise and to Bassompierre, who were in attendance, "You do not understand me now, you and the rest; but I shall die one of these days, and when you have lost me, you will know my worth, and the difference there is between me and other kings." "My God, sir," said Bassompierre, "will you never cease vexing us by telling us that you will soon die? You will live, please God, some good long years. You are only in the flower of your age, in perfect bodily health and strength, full of honor more than any mortal man, in the most flourishing kingdom in the world, loved and adored by your subjects, with fine houses, fine women, fine children who are growing up." Henry sighed as he said, "My friend, all that must be left." These are the last words that are to be found of his in contemporary accounts. A few hours afterwards he was smitten to death in his carriage, brought back to the Louvre, laid out on his bed. One of his councillors of state, M. de Vie, seated on the same bed, had put to his mouth his cross of the order, and directed his thoughts to God. Milon, his chief physician, was at the bedside, weeping. His surgeons wanted to dress his wounds. A sigh died away on his lips, and "It is all over," said the physician; "he is gone." Guise and Bassompierre went out to look after what was passing out of doors. They met "M. de Sully with some 40 horse, who, when he came up to us, said to us in tearful wise, 'Gentlemen, if the service ye vowed to the king is impressed upon your souls as deeply as it ought to be with all good Frenchmen, Swear all of ye this moment to keep towards the king his son and successor the same allegiance that ye showed him, and to spend your lives and your blood in avenging his death." "Sir," said Bassompierre, "it is for us to cause this oath to be taken by others; we have no need to be exhorted thereto." Sully turned his eyes upon him, he adds, and then went and shut himself up in the Bastille, sending out to seize and carry off all the bread that could be found in the market and at the bakers'. He also despatched a message in haste to M. de Rohan, his son in law, bidding him face about with 6,000 Swiss, whose colonel general he was, and march on Paris." Henry IV. being dead, it was for France and for the kingship that Sully felt alarm and was taking his precautions. End of Project Gutenberg, Chapter 36.